Hvad tænker du det? Så Glenn, skriver lige på chatten.
Okay. Welcome to this wonderful world of new media.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and we are still missing one group, right?
Yeah, we're missing Liz.
Yeah. She might be caught in another dimension.
Okay.
Right. So everything is working okay. I will get Liz. And I don't know if you actually managed to talk about anything while
Liz was starting to ask a question that got all chopped up on my end, so I only heard little bits of it, or make a point. Don't even know if it was a question, but
She was talking about John Hattie and visible learning we use in Denmark, and that we use it quite a lot in math in Denmark already. But could you say something about the similarities with the John Hattie visible learning and this hotseattutorial? It's a very difficult word to pronounce.
Pedagogy, I think.
Pedagogy, yeah. Yeah, well, I think I would have to, I don't know that I know the visible learning, so I might need you to tell me a little bit more about it if you can.
At my work, there was this guy who told us about John Hattie and visible learning, and he told us that the teacher has a huge role if he believes in what he's doing. And I thought about the similarity when we saw that, what was it called, that guy on the video, Teach Like a Champion, because Gordon Code, I think he's called, he told us about efficacy, the teacher's efficacy, and if you believe in what you do, the teaching is 80% better. And it's about giving the pupils the responsibility of their own learning. And visible learning is a huge buzzword in Denmark right now. So there's a lot of similarities in what I read. Anyways.
Yeah.
But now Liz is back on, and I don't know what she was trying to say.
Nothing. I went to the kitchen and I made myself some coffee.
Yeah, but you were talking about math and John Hattie.
No. I was talking about that we have the Hattie way and we have the
Pedagogy. Yeah.
Pedagogy. I need to practice that word. We have the H word, and then we have blended learning, and it's all together the same in some ways. And we can see that we share some points in every subject. And in Denmark, we use the competences a lot when we teach in math. And That's where everything starts with the competences. And I think it's in many ways it's like a story going on. It's the same in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we were trying to say about our work was that this group that I've worked with, I think on one level you're right, they share some of the features of these other forms of learning, but their main focus is to try to get teachers to take students' ideas seriously.
Yeah.
And this is very hard for teachers to do because teachers have a curriculum that they have to stick to, and they also are required to measure outcomes. And if you think about it, if you can stick to the curriculum and measure outcomes and not pay any attention to what the students are actually thinking, you could actually come away not having any idea of what they're actually thinking. And so their focus is on trying to take students' ideas seriously and kind of develop a conversation out of that. And so really take them up. They don't worry so much about when students are wrong. They worry more about what it is that students are trying to say. And then I think what I was adding to that, just sort of observing them, was that there's a kind of double reflection that goes on in that process. The first level of reflection is you have to engage in the practice yourself, if it's solving a math problem or doing whatever, and then reflect upon what was going on for you while you were engaging in that practice. And then you have to look at someone else engaging in the practice and reflect upon what's going on for them, right? And so you can think, well, I was thinking this, I wonder if that person was thinking the same thing, or I wonder if they were thinking something different. And I think that kind of double reflection that I observed with the math forum group is not the same, but related to sort of the Hutagaji article about the double loop learning. There's a kind of double reflection that's going on there too.
Yes.
In Denmark, we often work with
I think Liz froze, maybe.
I think she did freeze too, yeah.
But as regards to the curriculum that you have to, teach towards them, I think that in Denmark you more like you're moving towards curriculum that is competency based, and you have to make learning goals for your teaching, and the learning goals are situated in competencies. So that's a new thing. I don't know if it's new, but it's a new thing, yeah.
Right.
And you have to make all the goals visible for both students and parents as well.
Yeah, right. We have similar kinds of problems. And how are competencies defined here?
Yeah, well, in mathematics, it's more. I think it is moving towards practical competencies that you have to be able to use. Yeah, well, you sort of divide in what the goal is and how you can measure the goal and how you can use the goal, so to speak. So if you say okay, today I'm going to teach how to make triangles, and why is that, and how is that, and how can you use it in your further education or further, I don't know.
And another thing that is important for visible learning is that the pupil can say, how do you think you can learn this? You can sort of choose a preferred learning style, which is something that was mentioned with the double loop learning, that you think about what works for me.
Right. Yeah.
How do I learn the best? I mean, and that's an old thought. I mean, Howard Gardner put it up for us years ago. So how do I learn best?
But isn't one of the key features that teaching, as we know, is being more or less redefined? That we are learning together more than defining teaching and pupil, or teacher and pupil.
Yeah. Right. And do you think that conflicts with sort of, you know, kind of an outcome, competency-based outcome sort of measurement?
Yeah, most definitely, because it's something that we are not used to. We are used to having the teacher and the pupil roles defined
Yeah.
quite clearly.
Yeah.
So yes, it conflicts.
Yeah. I like to think about, you know, I think that learning in some ways is very similar to the way in which
I think we are
professional...
alone again.
You can't hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay.
But,
Meta, can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay. So I was going to say that I think that what I like to think about is the way in which professional groups produce knowledge is, I think, very similar to the way it would be good to think about learning. I think it's odd that we don't think about learning that way. And if you think about the way professional groups produce knowledge, whether they're scientists or lawyers or business people or whatever they are, they do it collaboratively. They do it in groups. There is a kind of necessity that everybody be competent, but you can often not be able to say who created the best idea or where did that idea come from, or you know what I mean, because it's a sort of dynamic group process, and yet because we have a need to sort of measure how well students are doing, we kind of artificially fragment the process.
Yeah.
I have a question. Is it okay?
Yep.
Well, now she froze again. But there's a question here on the tweet in here from Kim saying the teacher's role as a facilitator instead of the one with all the knowledge.
Yeah. Yes, in America we say that teaching should move from being the sage on the stage to the guide on the side, which is a cute little expression. But I think that, yeah, I think that and a lot of teachers don't do that. I don't know what you guys have experienced, but many teachers don't do that because it's incredibly hard to do. It's really hard. Even if we have a moment of reflection and just think about what we're doing right now. I was telling Rika before we got started that it would be much easier for me to lecture to you all for an hour than do this, right? Because now I have to listen very carefully to what people are saying, and we have to come up with a common language, and you tell me about visible learning, but I don't know visible learning, so we have to sort of grope our way toward being able to make sense of things together, which I think is a much better process, but it's a much harder process.
I think that one of the things that's hard is for some teachers to acknowledge the fact that the children are much smarter than we are sometimes, and they possess more knowledge and more competences than we do. And if we step back and as a facilitator, we acknowledge that fact and we let them be their own teachers, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing for a teacher because that's not how we were raised, and that's not how we went to school.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I agree.
also, I think that the education system needs to change if we must change our way of teaching, because we have all those rules about how much of this hvad hedder det? Pensum curriculum, yes, to get through in 1 year and so on. So it's also the education system who needs to think more extensional.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
agree.
imagine that as a teacher, it must be frightening to envision that in a year you might fail to get your students through tests, and that's maybe the reason why it's too frightening.
Yeah.
But we don't want to teach to the test, and I don't think it's a reason to do anything different because we have the tests. I think just because we have the test, we need to do teaching the way we know is the best way to do it, and not by the test. Because it's not possible to be a teacher with your own heart if you just teach to the test. So forget it. It's not a reason.
But I think that maybe in the process ja, hvad hedder det? Altså man giver sig selv, man prøver på at overbevise sig selv om, at den her test i sidste ende, at den ikke kommer til at gå. That the test, that it don't work. That you don't get through the tests, and maybe decide in that matter that to go back to teaching in the old style.
But you must decide, do you want to teach? Do you want the teaching to go good, to function, or do you want the test to function?
But is it necessarily an either or? Is it necessarily so black and white?
In many ways it is.
Well, I don't think so, because research is starting to show that if you teach with competency in mind, you're still able to go to the test and do quite well, actually. If you teach towards enhancing competencies, you might get reflective students instead, and then you are able to go to tests and so on. If you reflect on how your everyday life is as regards to mathematics, you may be able to solve all the mathematical problems in the mathematics tests.
Yeah. I think what teachers in my country would say is that they accept that this kind of more progressive style of teaching and more interactive style works. What they're afraid of is that it moves more slowly and that you can't cover all the areas if you do that. And so their fear is that the students will do well on the test in the stuff that you were able to go through, but not so well on the stuff that you didn't manage to get to. And I think that that's a realistic concern, at least at certain subjects and at certain levels. That's a reasonable concern. I think it's just, there are tensions that can't easily be pushed to the side. At the same time, maybe we should be revising curriculum so that, especially at earlier levels, if there was a sort of really solid foundation. What happens in all the fields, not just science and math, but in the humanities too, students don't get really solid foundations, and so then when they go to the higher levels, they don't have as strong a base to build it on. And so what you're really doing is both trying to teach the curriculum and teach remedial material at the same time.
Another problem that we discussed when you froze was that when you have 28 pupils in one classroom, for a lot of teachers, it's quite difficult to say, okay, we give space for noticing and wondering, and different learning styles and all that. And in the articles we read, it said multitasking and all that is proven to be a good thing, also to compare them, to make them ready for working life later on. But it's a little bit difficult to control 28 pupils that can do multitasking and all that, instead of just saying, look at me and raise your hands and I'm in control. I'm the one teaching you. Yeah. That's a difficult thing too.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with Stiegler and Stevenson. They were the psychologists who did the early work on schools in different cultures. And one of the things that this was a long time ago in their early work, and one of the things that they were really interested in showing was that in couple of different Asian cultures, but we could talk about Japan. Early learning is really very interesting because they keep the numbers down and they give teachers the same amount of prep time as teaching time. So if you have an 8-hour day, you prep for 4 hours and you teach for 4 hours. And of course what that means is that they've made a huge investment in primary education, because you have to have double the staff. Maybe more than double the staff, right? Because your class size is relatively small, and you're only in the classroom teaching for half the day. But what that meant was all the stuff we're talking about, those teachers could do. They spent a lot of time trying lessons out on each other. They did reflection. They, when they were actually in the classroom working with kids were solving different kinds of problems, and they looked at problems from multiple angles, and it wasn't exactly self-directed, determined learning, but it was sort of certainly more toward that direction, where the kids were really sort of, talking about, well, I worked on this that way, I worked on this that way.
That's very interesting, but we're far from that in Denmark, because it's very different right now. We don't have that much prep time.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're far from that too. I mean, we're really very different than that. And I also think the whole, I too, as a university professor, have to, I think people here do too, right? I have to sort of list the learning outcomes for my course, and I have to list how I'm going to be measuring those learning outcomes. And I have mixed feelings about that. Part of me feels like, okay, maybe it encourages professors to reflect about, what they want students to do and what they're going to get out of this course. But I find that it fragments the material in ways that are not conducive to this kind of reflective learning that we're talking about. Because I don't know that my learning outcomes are discrete, and I don't know that they are discretely measurable. You know what I mean? That I can measure each one independently.
I have tried to make lesson studies at my school here in Denmark, and I think lesson study is a very good way to do many things and solve many problems, and it's a good way for the teachers to speak about didactic. And it's a good way to see what is the good stuff to work with in the math lessons. And I'm sure it was good for them that we were looking at each other teaching, and it have a lot of good things in its nature to make lesson studies. But it was hard to do because we always need to be more adults in the classroom, and that's a challenge. Then I went to a lesson study here in Denmark by one of the famous Japanese teachers. He was teaching some students here in Denmark, and there was, I think we were 200 adults sitting around, and the students were from the 4th grade, and they were wonderful, and they did exactly as the Japanese teacher told them to do. And then the big question in the end was, why don't we do it? All people, 200 math teachers, we all said to ourselves, why don't we do it? It's just to do it. And now we're speaking about, oh, how many hours do we have? But I think we need to try to do it, because I think it will give our teachers' heart some more vitamins, and it will.
Uh-oh.
Kim is saying that it's we talk a lot about school teachers' perspective. I think as a social pedagogue, I am less inclined to work with reflection, he says.
Or perhaps a different kind of reflection.
Yes.
Like,
well, then we're back to about digital literacy. What's it called? The Norwegian guy talks about implanting all the digital literacy and competencies down, and to start when children are quite small, and even and even not in school and not outside school and everywhere. So that's, I mean, so as in regards to teaching everywhere or educate everywhere, it's important to know that how we get children, people, everyone to reflect on how they learn.
Mm-hmm.
I think we must start with ourselves. I need to think about what I'm doing, and then I'm going to teach the children to reflect about what they are doing, and that's the only thing I can do.
And that's exactly what I mean by the double reflection, because I think you're absolutely right. And that also makes me think, not wanting to be too didactic here, but do we want to, so one of the questions we asked all of you was, what do these perspectives make you notice and wonder in relation to your present course and projects? Like, do you have thoughts about what this makes you think about the current projects you're working on?
Yeah, as Liz just said, we have to acknowledge that we are also facilitators and instructors in our own learning process and our own design, as well as designing the learning process for others. So before we can design anything for the people, we have to do what Liz just said, to know how we learn ourselves and how we facilitate our own learning. And in that process, we might come up with a great idea on how, I don't know, hopefully.
Yeah.
And the whole
Good.
reflection goes well with the idea of our design process being iterative, and that we just keep on reflecting and then go back in the loop, and then it's quite good drawing the loop thing with a double loop and a single loop.
Yeah. And I think part of that process that someone was saying earlier is they were talking about, being able to admit to our students things that we don't know or things that we might be wrong about. But I think it's really a valuable thing to be able to, in that iterative design process, critique your own work. And that's always, I think it's a challenge to do well. I notice in myself, just psychologically, I want to either avoid critiquing my work or say it's crap. I have those two poles, right? I either want to say, oh, this is okay, it's pretty good, it's a pretty good paper, you know, let's not talk about it. Or I want to say, oh, this is absolute rubbish, we should just throw it out. Neither of those are particularly productive, right? Because being able to do the next iteration requires saying being very good at reflecting on, well, what's good about this and what needs to change.
Then I think the internet is a big helper for all of us, because we want success, or think it's not functioning. But the internet is a possibility for us to share what we think. For example, by blogging, and it's a great way to learn about your own way to learn and your own reflections when you write on a blog. I think I have learned a lot about it, because when you press the send, it's out of your, and then I need to see. Then I can see afterwards. I can see, do people agree or do they not agree?
Right.
And I have made some blog posts, and I think, oh, they will kill me. I won't survive. I was so sure. But I'm still alive.
Right.
So I think it's a way to learn about yourself, your reflections. It's by writing articles, writing blogs. And blogs, I think blogs is a perfect way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. What I like about the blog form is exactly what you're saying, Liz, that it's more formal than speech, but it's less formal than a finished paper.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of post your sort of measured opinion on something, and you can just you can take that critique. You can take whatever people say back to you, some of which is not useful, but a lot of which might be useful.
And then you can count your likes. If you got likes on it, okay, then I'm on the right way.
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
like the Olympics in a way.
Yes.
But that's the thing. If you're in a discussion, in a verbal discussion, you have to stand up for your I don't know, for what you're saying and your answers. I can't just say something here and then just lean back. I have to argument. But if you put a blog post out there and you don't feel like commenting or answering on people's comments, you can just choose that. So it has the possibility of both arguing and stepping back, I guess.
Yeah.
But it can be hard to step back, because you have wrote it, you have your picture on it, you have maybe it was the opinion you had 2 days ago. Maybe you changed. Maybe you have seen, oh, it's not good. But in that moment, when you press the send button, it was very good. But it can change.
Yeah. Well, and that's right. In that way, it is more formal than speech. You know, in speech, it's much easier to just say, "Okay, change my mind. I don't believe that anymore." Whereas you can do that with a blog, but it's a little more formal to change your opinion, especially if it was a long post about something that you were passionate about.
And it's still out there, and maybe somebody took a screenshot of it or printed it or anything, you know?
Sure. Or maybe
it's there forever.
Yeah, some other website decided to sponsor it or something. Yeah.
Another good thing about the blogging is that we do our best because we know that other people are going to see it. It's not only our teacher. And after being taught this way in this thing, ITDD, I'm thinking that blogging is a good way in the schools as well. And when other pupils, the buddies, are going to see what they made, they're going to do their best. And the feedback is also something that is mentioned many times in these texts.
Yeah.
It's so important for the learning process.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get teachers to blog. It's not easy to get teachers to blog. I've tried
not
in,
yet.
in
Not
the
yet.
whole community here. I've tried all the math teachers. I made a blog for them, and then I decided we're going to blog, and they're all using Facebook and writing about everything. But when I asked them to write about math, they wouldn't do it.
But could that have something to do with the format? Because I'm thinking, like the Facebook post I posted on, you're not entitled to have an opinion, if any of you looked into that, that if you want to blog about something, you need to know something, or at least that's the opinion out there.
Right.
That your Facebook, you can just have a gut feeling, or you can be enraged or whatever, but if you put a blog post out there, you want to communicate on a more serious scale, which is perhaps also right, at least when I blog, and so you need to have an opinion. Like in this hot seat, you also need to have an opinion. So it's not enough to just, at least as a math teacher, perhaps just like feel stuff. You also need to have like some sort of argument for why you feel that way, or why you're entitled to feel that way. And that can be perhaps transgressive to Danish teachers.
But I think that, Liz, maybe couldn't it have something to do with, just a final comment before I hop out, the fear of parents reading it? I mean,
no, it was closed. It was only for teachers. But I think it's a way that teachers. It was closed. It was only for all the math teachers. But I think a way that we could have a better reputation, it is by practicing and writing and having opinions. If we just take a book and said that I'm a teacher, I have a book, it's not enough. I'm a teacher, I have a book, I have several devices, I have technology, I have everything. Then I'm a teacher. But if you just have a book, it's not enough. And you have to start by writing your opinions. It's a way to practice, and we must do it together. The teachers at the school. I think it's a way to start.
What you just said is what's standing in the mission of the Math Forum, that the article you write about. It was on the website Math Forum, and it was the mission was to exactly share and discuss and argue.
Right. Yeah, and I was going to say it's interesting because they have a pretty dynamic community of math teachers who do blog. Although my guess is it's a real minority of math teachers. I think that what happens for us, and this is probably fairly typical, is that the math teachers who feel like they are really competent in math such that they can just talk about it, they're the ones who blog. And they blog not only about the mathematics that they're teaching, but the sort of pedagogy involved in how they handle problems. And I think it helps. I think it scaffolds some teachers because it allows some other teachers to make comments, but maybe they wouldn't feel strong enough to have their own blog post, but they can do some commenting in these spaces. But I guess in a way that the teachers who blog regularly are sort of the mathematics superstars. They're sort of known as the people who really know their stuff.
Yeah, but I also think it's deep in us. We don't want to make mistakes. For example, in schools, just pupils, if they do a mistake or say something weird, they're getting ridiculed by the others. And I think it's the same, because if I post something on I'm a history teacher, so on a history blog, and it's maybe wrong, or the years are wrong, or something, I'm failing, and that's not good.
No, you're learning.
Yeah, I know, but in my school, in my school when I was a kid.
That's how it's measured, right?
Yeah. And we have to change that around. We have to make a community, make a group where it's okay to make mistakes, and that's gonna be hard. I think.
No, I agree. I mean, and I think that you have to get a sort of community reflecting upon that in multiple ways. So the same kind of reflexive learning that we're talking about in content areas has to be in these processes too. I try to make sure that I always say to my students that I don't know something if I don't know it. You know, so if they ask me a question that I don't know, I want to always say, well, I don't know that. And then we can talk about, well, how do we find it out? Or if I get something wrong, I like to say that too, because you have to sort of reflect upon these processes that, you know, we all know that that experts make lots of mistakes. That's how they become experts.
Yeah. But it's funny you say that, because I know it's a joke, but all jokes has some truth in them. At the Danish teacher education in Aarhus, we were taught that that if you don't know an answer, just say to the students that you will return to it in the end of the lesson, because then they don't remember that far. They're just gonna work on what you told them to. And I know it's a joke. It's not something that was it was not but it was a joke, but still had some truth in it.
Well,
we have the same joke at the university system. I will just say, yeah, let me look into that the next time, because you might be able to remember for the end of the lesson, but you won't remember till the next time.
Wow. Yeah. And the truth in those jokes is that we're always trying to mask or hide what we're wrong about or what we don't know.
Mm.
And I think that's right. And I think it's even useful. Look, whenever I say to a group of students, I don't know that, it's never comfortable. I mean, I've been doing that for 25 years. It's still not comfortable to do that, because our culture has taught us that you're the teacher. You should know everything.
But I think I have another opinion. I think because I'm a teacher, I can't know everything. But because I'm a teacher, I dare to say I don't know everything. And that's why I'm going to teach the children. You can't learn everything, but you must decide what do we need to learn.
Yeah.
I work a lot in the special needs, and I can see on some of the children, they don't have so many possibilities to learn everything, but I must help them to see what they need to learn for the future. And that's the way I think I must be a teacher. And I think the teacher must reconsider the way we think we must be. I think it's old-fashioned to think that we know everything. And the children are different. And that's why the teaching must be different.
Yeah.
We have new possibilities. We have the internet. We have a lot of possibilities. That's why we are here. That's why we're so interested in teaching, because there's enormous, a lot of possibilities, and we must make new combinations. We must see ourselves in new ways, and we need to find new ways for learning for the children. What they're going to learn, how they're going to do it. I think it's the most interesting time ever for a teacher just now, because everything it's possible to change a lot of things. Yeah. We don't need the books anymore. We don't need to know everything. We don't need to teach the children the ways we used to do. I think it's a fantastic time for the time being, because we need to change a lot of things in the education. And I know we have the goals, I know we have the curriculum, but we need to make our own version of all those papers.
So then the important question becomes how to make that change in intentional ways, and in knowing ways, and in research-grounded ways, perhaps even, so it doesn't become coincidental or just happens to be so because I like Lego Mindstorms, let's do education with Lego Mindstorms,
No.
for example, or I like to talk, so let's everybody talk, or whatever. So that's the kind of challenge that I have posed to you. Like, if you're very good at noticing and wondering about different stuff, and you actually share an opinion or share a baseline insights into being a teacher or being in education, or what it feels like for a child to be in education and what the bright possibilities might be. But how do we take those things and kind of design for them in ways that are grounded in non-coincidental or intentional things or ways or processes or actions?
That's why it's interesting to be a teacher for the time being, because we need to find the way, and we need to know that there must be. We need to read books, and we need to find evidence for the new ways we're going to teach. And I think we must make a lot of evaluation, a lot of reflection, and a lot of teamwork. And we need to not just teachers, but teachers and pedagogues. We need to be together and have more eyes on the teaching, on the children, and the learning and everything. I think in many ways, we are redesigning a lot of things in the school. I can't see myself as the same person I was 10 or 15 years ago, and it's the same with the children. They are so different today. They have needs they didn't have earlier, and they have skills they didn't have earlier, and the parents have needs too we haven't seen earlier. So it's hard work.
Yeah. So also as a teacher, you need to be a learner, like in the hotseattutorial approach, that we also need to be the learners as teachers. If you, I just refer to the articles about adult education. So I think if you want to change about how you teach children, you also need to be the learner yourself.
The difference today and in the old times is that our learners today can find many answers on the net. They can Google the answers, and sometimes they come to school with much more knowledge than you expect them to have. So I think it's easier for them to get all this informal knowledge than in the old times, and that's something that affects our teaching too, because we are now not teachers anymore, but we are a kind of facilitators, and I have a lot of learners that come with tell me about things I didn't know, and it's interesting, and I like when I don't know an answer, I also tell them to I don't know it, I am a human, and I don't have the answers of everything, and they like go home and search for the answer and come back next day and tell me that I found the answer, and so on. And that's because of the internet and Google and so on. So yeah.
But perhaps we need to be more than facilitators. You know, we need to do more than just make room for the kids to make their own ways. Like going back to the teacher authority we were talking about, perhaps we need to be more like in a middle ground between old schoolmasters and rundkredspædagoger or facilitators. Perhaps we need to be guides, and to be guides we need to be very knowledgeable about what it means to guide something, guide a process, guide a child, guide a class, guide ourselves. So it's not just to kind of set the children loose. I think the competent child, as I was writing in the chat, is kind of debunked. Children are not competent by nature, and they're not natural learners or whatever they are, but not in perhaps in like education or schools. Engaging knowledge is, as you know, when when you get here at the university, it's very hard work, and it's the same kind of experience that these children are kind of confronted with, and we mustn't like leave it up to them or leave them alone or leave them to their own devices. But how do we then guide that process?
Yeah.
And to guide that process, we need to be almost like researchers, playful researchers in a way.
Yeah, and if I can sort of give an example, Rika, of what you're saying. So I've noticed with my undergraduate students that they have different kinds of problems. So this fits in with what some of you were saying, that the situation is different now, and they do have access to the internet, and they have access to a lot of information, and that's really useful and good. But I've noticed that my undergraduate students have two main problems, and they're related problems. One, they don't have any idea how to do a literature search, and because they think you just Google it. And two, they don't know how to evaluate sources at all. So they're really good at getting at information sort of broadly, but they don't know how to craft that search to look for something more specific, and they have real trouble. Like I found an article in a Wikipedia entry and something on somebody's blog, and they're going to count them all the same. And so the sort of what needs to be guided has shifted, right? In the old days, we were all taught how to search very effectively because it had to all be done through indexes and card catalogs and that sort of thing, and they don't have that background.
That's the digital building you are talking about. Teachers have to integrate in their teaching, right?
Yeah.
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 That's a big issue because in my last semester I wrote about digital building, and what a big problem many youngers meet in the internet, and about not searching and not be kildekritiske. How do you say that in the English? Critical about the literature and what they read. So that's an interesting field.
Yeah, I even think Wikipedia is interesting for this, because if you really know your subject well, you know whether a Wikipedia entry is good or not. And so actually Wikipedia can be quite useful, but you have to already know the subject to know how useful it is. If you know nothing about philosophy, and you look up a philosophy entry, you don't have any way of assessing whether it's a good explanation or not. Which is an interesting problem.
It is.
Yeah, and in the Danish school, we often see that the teachers they say to the pupils that they can't use Wikipedia as a source, and I think that's a good idea in some cases, because you often see some bullshit on Wikipedia, but still there's a lot of good stuff, and the students don't know, as Mona talked about, they don't know what to search for if it's not Wikipedia.
Right. But that could be that in itself could just be an interesting exercise with a group of students, right? To say to a group of history students, so how do we figure out whether this entry is a good entry or not?
Yeah.
I mean, and not give them the answer, but just say, what would you do? How would you figure that out?
Yeah, and in history would be a fantastic thing, because then they would have to search for other places where it was, for example, a year or something like that, or a person. That would be a good exercise.
Yeah.
But again, do we have the time for that?
Yes, right, exactly.
That's the question.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
But also, I think it's important for you to think about as a group that you are possibly not normal teachers. Actually, you are actually the teachers taking this master's degree because you want to learn and know, and you are perhaps not every teacher, like I am not every university teacher, and my way of teaching is very much acknowledging, as Janus would say, me not being every student, because I was the perfect university student. I just wanted to listen to lectures, go and read all the books, take all the notes. I didn't want group work. I just wanted the master's voice, and just wanted to kind of do every assignment. And not all students are like that. And I need to think about that when I teach. So the first kind of classes I taught was very, very not awesome. They were me lecturing from 30-page scripts with 100 PowerPoints littered with quotes to show how much knowledge I could transmit to my students in the least time. And that's not how I teach anymore, as you might notice. So I don't teach for me. I also teach for me because I think it's important that we don't teach for a specific group. We don't teach for the ones who don't like math. We don't teach for the ones who love math. We teach for math, or whatever that means. And how do we do that? That might require doing processes more than teaching, actually. So how do I make room or guide processes that are all different kinds of processes more than teach? So the question of having the time to do so, and so in a history lesson, well, we might need to do that in a history lesson, so we make room for people to be on different levels, but learning in a way that actually makes learning interesting. I wouldn't say fun, because I don't necessarily think that learning needs to be fun. It can be fun, but sometimes learning is also just boring, but you know you need to learn this. So I think thinking about this course as well, is the question is also how can we then make designs that in some ways kind of facilitate that guiding or something like that.
Yeah, when we're talking about this, I'm all the time I'm thinking about flip classroom, because I see that some of the good stuff about the flipped classroom is that you have that facilitating constantly in the video, and you have the opportunity to work on each individual pupil's goals and education. Where opposite you have a in Danish it's an asked to seat education, where the students sit and just learn a lot or learn nothing. And just receive knowledge, but in flipped classroom they receive the knowledge before the class, and they how do you say, what can you say? Yeah, but it's a way of facilitating this education and learning, and still think about each individual's goals and meaning of the class.
Yeah, but here it might also be very, very important to reflect on that flipped classrooms are not for everyone.
Absolutely.
So how do we not just flip everything? How do we perhaps use that with an element alongside? I saw this amazing keynote at the Network Learning Festival of all places. Hail to the lecture without me being a talking head for 3 hours to kind of let you see into my way of thinking, like dialoguing with myself, like what the lecture should actually be. It shouldn't be me reading from PowerPoints, or it shouldn't be me transmitting knowledge, but the point of the lecture is to, for example, a bit like I did in the last hot seat, show you a way of thinking about texts, for example. But it shouldn't be all lectures. There should also be then a flipped classroom where you can kind of see stuff at your own pace, and maybe there should be some workshops, and maybe you should go and talk to people, and maybe you should build stuff, and maybe you should find your own theories and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but isn't the point that the design can differ according to what you're trying to teach or what you're trying to make your students do? Because if you choose one kind of design, you might put in some kinds of elements, and if you choose a different kind of design, you'll use different kind of elements, and they all facilitate different processes in the students.
Exactly, but a lot of teachers and even university teachers would say, well, I'm a lecturer. I lecture.
Mm-hmm.
So you take that as an identity and not as a design, for example, that have specific aims and not others. Or, well, I'm a creative pedagogue, so I only use Lego or whatever. You know, I don't lecture. I just let the children go loose and create their own stuff, for example.
Right. So part of what you're saying is that it becomes an identity issue for a lot of people, and that can actually get in the way of good design and good pedagogy. There's a lot of progressive university professors in the United States who think lecturing is bad, and so they just don't ever lecture. And what worries me about that is the rigidity of it, right? That absolutely never lecture. It strikes me as too much.
Yeah, it becomes a norm for the sake of the norm. Like, I hate school teachers, for example, because they are old-fashioned and they don't like technology, as you see in some projects. Or I love computer programming. You know, we should teach programming in schools because programming is awesome, without reflecting on what makes it awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it should be programming for the sake of programming, for example.
Yeah.
That's what I meant before when I wrote on the Today's Meet that teachers should start identifying as expert on the didactics instead of experts on subjects. Because if you're an expert on didactics, then you will reflect on choosing the right tools for different tasks and not always choosing the same tool.
Yeah, or using the same tool in very, very radical different ways, even breaking the tool.
Yeah.
Like this Hangout, for example. This Hangout can be used for me lecturing. It can be used for a group meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It can be used to talk to your children when you're staying in London. It could be used to broadcast an event out to I think 1,000 people. But yeah, surely it can be used for everything. But it can also not just be used for one thing. So I think it's like this mind-boggling universe we are kind of crawling into, which I call design thinking, and you might call didactics. That kind of makes everything very annoying.
Or intriguing.
Right, I was going to say, or interesting. Right, exactly.
Yeah, but still, we have so many ideas, and it's, of course it's fantastic. But still, we have this little pain in the ass called time on our hands. And how much time do you have to prepare for a lesson, for example? And I think it's nice to have many ideas and many ways to educate your pupils, but you still only have, I don't know what it is, actually about 45 minutes per day or something like that. Now the teachers must. I'm not in a job right now, but how much time do you have? It's not much. I know you have spare time, but not all teachers want to use that.
Well, so one thing that your question about time makes me think about is that we could maybe take a clue from design-based research And one of the things that folks who think about that do is they tend to start with very simple designs and then make small iterative changes to them. And what I like about that is that you can do that without dumping huge amounts of time, right? So you decide, okay, I'm going to design this interaction to be in Google Hangout, and we're going to have a chat window, and we'll just talk about something. And then, but we could continue to improve that design over time. This time we do it that way, but then we say, well, okay, it could have used this, or it could have used a whiteboard, or it could have, and we can build up to maybe a more sophisticated model that works even better, but we didn't dump a huge amount of time into it at once.
Yeah. And that's the key word here is sharing of knowledge, I think, between the teachers at a school. And I've seen somewhere that this is a problem because, again, if I have a good idea, it's mine and you can't use it, and the other teachers can't use it either, and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a problem only in the Danish school system. I think it's a problem many places.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, we have to be more willing to share ideas.
Yeah.
I think maybe one of the...
I didn't get that.
Oh, sorry. that was my iPhone that just went off for some reason. I wasn't even touching it.
But she didn't get it.
She didn't get it, no.
I was just thinking that one of the challenges that we might face is that we think that this is a big task to take on right now because technology is not a part of our education planning DNA yet.
Mm.
Every time we have to plan new stuff for the kids to learn, we have to first plan it. I'm talking from my own point of view right now. I first plan the thing, and then afterwards I think, oh, by the way, they have iPads. How can I use them in a clever way?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just not yet a big part of my DNA, and that might be a challenge. It's not that I don't want to use the technology. It's just not a part of me.
Well, I have a comment for that, Heidi. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Because in a way, I think when you're planning what is going to happen in school, then in a way that if you don't have a lot of money to buy a new book system and things like that, I find that the internet and all the things that it can do, it helps you with new ideas, and in that way you learn something new, and you learn something new that you can use and teach from. So
I agree with that. I just think that from my point of view, there's a problem in me taking inspiration off what the technology platforms that we have in Denmark, like Gyldendal or whatever, me taking inspiration from what is made possible for me instead of me inspiring them to make things that I need. Because they are not necessarily teachers. They might just be programmers or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge, that because I get the inspiration from there too, but I would like it to be the other way around, that I inspire the platforms.
Yeah, I can see that. But in a way, when I read something like the text from US and learn about the math forum, then I think, how can I use it in my daily work? And how can I inspire other people to likes math and likes to teach math and loves to give that knowledge to other kids and so on, and other teachers? How can I use it? And yeah, so in a way, the things that are going on and we don't know about, that's a very inspiring thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. No, and I agree with both of what both of you are saying. I think that it's true that there's lots of things about these kinds of tools that we haven't thought about in terms of what use they can be. I think this is part of what this course is about, right? To help us to think about, well, how can we design using a lot of these tools and using them in good, effective sorts of ways, and not just using them because they're there or because they might improve efficiency or something like that. And I mean, I'm teaching mostly courses in either education or anthropology, which is very different than math. But I try to think about, well, what can I learn about what the math forum's done, and how can I apply that to my own teaching? One of the main things that they've taught me is that all these communication tools have a different set of potentialities, and that different kinds of communication do different sorts of things. And so those are the kinds of things I try to think about. What use is this? I mean, the very thing that the traditional teacher doesn't want, we might want in our classes, right? In the traditional teaching, if you were talking in class, the teacher would slap your wrist and say, be quiet, you're not supposed to be speaking in class. But if you can set up a back channel where people are able to chat about things, even if they're spending, 75% of the time talking about non-related things, that could still be a very useful thing for them to have. Especially if you build it into the design.
Yeah, whenever they do some reflection about what's happening and what they're doing themselves, like in the considering way, then,
right.
Then you have the potential for learning more.
Right. Right. It's a musical interlude.
Yeah.
Let's look at our questions and see if there's anything we haven't touched.
Yeah.
I think there's an interesting thing going on in the chat right now. Let me see, I'm taking it out of the light. About sharing, like we just talked about, how to share. And you were talking about sharing in the groups, and that I might actually also be on the way to kind of lure you into sharing between groups, which is actually what this whole semester is about, because this is very much what you will be doing in the digital media course. You will share your exam papers with each other, and I can see how this is how this might be disturbing, because then people will steal my knowledge, and how this might also be kind of against how we were kind of brought up to protect the resources we have. So if I work very hard for this knowledge, I shouldn't just hand it to you freely. I should in some way keep it and then kind of maximize my profit on that knowledge. So if I just share it to you, you might also get an A or something like that. And there's so there's a lot of tension going on around the sharing concept, which is very also perhaps a very actually at the very core of this education, but also actually you at least at the core of some research. So what I learned by writing with people and by just opening my research to people and not kind of trademarking my knowledge, is that I actually learn more, and also that the world learns more. So it's also thinking about what it means to be an educator, the ethical choice of that choice, and what it means to be a researcher or a student, and the ethical choice, ethical implications of that choice. So what you will come to see, hopefully, and what have happened the last semesters, has been that you kind of see that it's not dangerous to share what you found. Actually, we are like one entity, and the awesomeness of that entity is everyone's responsibility, right? So we are only as awesome as we are together. That doesn't mean we all get an A, but what I found, at least, is that we actually tend to get higher grades if we only care about those grades, because that would be another implication of this course, is we tend to care less about the grades and are more kind of engrossed in the process of becoming this beast of knowledge, which is also a point of thinking about education. So this is very much also what kind of is at the core of this way of thinking about open education and online education and open resources. And I tend to think of myself as an open source researcher, which is this very radical concept of I have this dream of just writing my articles in Google Docs and sharing that link to the world, and they can come and write stuff or take stuff or whatever, because what's important is what I'm trying to learn, and not that I maximize my H index, as it's called in the researcher world, or get the high grade.
But then we're back to the cultural thing.
Yeah.
That we are taught from the beginning that we are measured in what we can.
Sorry.
We're measured in what we can deliver at the exams. I just saw that quote the other day again, that children cheat on tests because their grades are valued more than their learning.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so that's sort of a parallel to what I wanted to say, respond to this, which is we could create a context where we incentivize sharing. Because you're right, what the traditional context does is it incentivizes caring more about the grade than the learning. But what if we created versions of this, right? So that reviewers, volunteers who, sort of review for Microsoft or Apple or whatever, and their ratings go up as they've provided more solutions for people. And so there you have a very simplistic kind of, you're creating social status for the individual who shares more in that context. And while that's simple, it points the way towards saying, well, we can incentivize sharing if we want to. Right? We can create a situation where your grade is improved the more ideas that you share with your colleagues.
Yeah, but in Denmark we have the law of Jante. Janteloven it's called in Danish, and it's 10 laws about how to be a human being, and it's stupid, but law number 10 says you're not to think you can teach us anything, and that's the Danish mentality sometimes, unfortunately.
Well, but is sharing teaching?
What? Sorry?
Is sharing teaching? Maybe I just share an idea with you.
Yeah, but still, when you're sharing, you're collaborating in some kind of way of thinking, or when you're sharing. Of course, it's not always teaching, but sometimes it still makes me smarter.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's a stupid idea. When you share something with me, you teach me in a way.
Yeah.
Not directly, but you teach me and you teach us. And hopefully we can teach you also a bit. But it's not directly teaching, but it's still some kind of
Well, you're right. What you're saying is that the culture is going to, someone might be, an individual might be less willing to share because they're afraid that this looks like something that as a Dane they know they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
There's also another point of view with the sharing part, because what if I share something that is not good enough, and
Sure.
and what if what if people think that, well, he doesn't get any kind of work. So that could also mean something in how much we share, because
Yeah.
we had this inventory part of our earlier study where we had to share our ideas with the Greek university students, and at first we were a bit in my group we were a bit afraid of well, are they going to steal our idea?
Mhm.
But when you think of it in a way, it's very difficult to make the idea alive. So so in that way, it's the sharing part is it's very good, and you have to have a lot of perspective into what you share and what you can learn from it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you need a community.
Yeah.
And you need community norms, because you need the community to say, okay, Wes shared an idea, but he's got some problems with this idea because he's got some of his facts wrong. And then you want the community to be able to do that politely.
Yeah.
Because you don't want anybody feeling badly that they're being attacked in that, for reasons that we talked about earlier, right? That we're already afraid to be wrong about stuff. So it is you're right, it's a complex problem, because you want a community of individuals who are sharing these ideas together, and that they feel safe doing that, and they also feel safe being critiqued. And so I would say that's a very very big design problem, wouldn't you?
Yeah. That also, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. But I think it's kind of also hardwired into the system and to our thinking, like stealing the idea part you were talking about, Frederik. It's how we often think about our ideas. It's also how, so there's this big project, the Fab Lab at School project, that some of you might know about, kind of trying to also kind of look into how creative and innovative children think they are, and how innovative they think their idea is, and often they think they are quite amazing at getting ideas and getting innovative ideas, and we also tend to think this about ourselves. But often that idea we have is not worth stealing, or put differently, it's not unique. What makes that idea unique is what you do with it. So me saying, oh, I'm working on the MOOC project, and I'm trying to make this MOOC all about empathy. So you trying to make a empathic MOOC, for example, is not stealing my idea, because as you will see, if you start sharing everything, still your projects will be vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
And your knowledge building will be vastly different, and your grades will be different, and your exam papers will be different. Even those people I have in like a 5-group design team that have kind of lost all identity, as they should, along the course, and just is this one group sharing everything and talking every day. When they come to writing the exam papers and hand them in, they are totally different. So there's not much to steal, so to speak, or what there is to steal is not yours in that way. What is yours is the thing you then do with the MOOC, or the way you think about it, or the way you write about it. And even if you all read Freire, or if you all read Diana Loylar, you would still not do the same thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I'm also kind of sharing and caring in the chat. at the moment. There's actually some very, very nice things going on there at the moment.
Yeah.
And you can log it afterwards. Yeah, you're looking at it, Wes, right?
I like the idea of not sharing toothbrushes. I think that's very well.
Yeah. And I think I will try to reach out to a couple of 4 of the former students, because I also actually did that last year. So they can kind of tell you about how it's not dangerous to share everything and what the benefits of. So what become the kind of signature concept of last year was the weak ties, strong ties thinking. And you had the strong ties in your group and you shared everything in the group. I think some of the groups were in a hangout like 20 hours a week, just driving or making dinner or whatever, talking and thinking together. But the weak ties links became very, very important to those groups. And I think there's a risk of this not happening to this year, because why it happened last year was we had this joint exhibition and they had to have these special interest groups that work together across groups, one from each group like this, but on their own each week. So they met the other groups all the times, and those special interests they were sharing across groups became also a group. So the group were not groups, but they were also cross groups and stuff like that. So the whole strong tie, weak tie kind of disintegrated into this beast of knowledge, or whatever we shall call it. And that really came to the point where an old Marxist actually set up this Klassens format where they kind of met every week to just talk about what was the difficulties in each group. Did they have were they under too much stress? What could be done? Did they lack knowledge on a certain subject? How could we help them get that? I know some schools, if you need like somewhere to go and do your empirical studies, stuff like that. And that happened every week on a specific time, and I was never included in those because they were very private. What was then awesome was that they shared those streams, they shared their private caring sessions with the world. They were open to the world, and they shared it with the educators. I think that end of that course was, I know me and Janus were both kind of teary eyes, because the amount of trust from a student and from the groups to share everything and then show their vulnerability and their not knowing to the educators. You are at least as vulnerable on that matter as I am as an educator. I want to know everything, but you don't want to come off as dumb because, you know, is this a learning moment or an assessment moment? I don't know. Is this hot seat a learning moment or an assessment moment? I don't know. So I think this is one of the interesting things that could happen if we want it to happen. But again, as a designer, I would say it's all about the design. So it's about how we make it happen through setting up enculturating structures, or structures that will kind of invite and promote that rather than work against that.
Yeah.
So, Rikke, you as a university teacher, you are telling us that in this environment of being protected, everything is, you have to protect your research and everything like that, and you are going to, when you're saying to us that we should give up the idea of not of protecting our things and share everything. Is that right?
Yeah, depending on what kind of research you're doing, of course. You might need to protect your research subjects in some research projects, right? If you're working with vulnerable people or something, you don't necessarily want me to have all of the data you have. But that's not really what we're talking about, right? So what we are talking about is me. So I'm writing this paper with Mikkel on superpositional teaching. How kind of awesome is that a concept? Because superposition is things you can be at the same time. So you might think, oh yeah, superpositional teaching, that's kind of awesome. Let me write a paper coining that term. That could potentially, in my view, if I was not an open source researcher, destroy my career because I wanted to coin that term so I could get a lot of citations. But what I found is sharing everything doesn't kind of make possibilities go away. Actually, it creates more possibilities. Also for funding, and also for citations, and also for X, Y, and Z. It doesn't mean it doesn't have like dangers and risks. But as researcher, I don't want to play it safe. I want to go wild. I want to show also, and this is also what this course is about, and this is also what your education is about, and this is also what you are about in a certain way, showing that there's different ways of being an educator, or being a teacher, or being a researcher, or being in a group, or doing online education. It doesn't mean that you are, what's it called, forsøgsdyr. Yeah, guinea pigs. It doesn't make
research
you guinea
animals.
Yeah,
No.
it doesn't make you research animals, even though I write an article about you, as I did last year. Actually, we wrote it together in a certain way. And it doesn't make you my guinea pigs, and it doesn't make me your guinea pig, and doesn't make each other your guinea pigs. It's not what it is about, because it's not me trying to make mini-me's of you. God, no, I hope not. But it's about seeing that, and this is where the hippie stuff come in, sorry, is seeing that everything is possible, but we just need to find out how it's possible. So it's not that you need to be an open source researcher, you can also be an H-index researcher. How do you become that? It's just showing that there's not one student, and there's not one way of doing education, and there's not one platform, or there's not one technology, and there's not one educator. So what kind of design, what kind of educator, what kind of values and virtues and worth do you want to embody through the design process you are doing, which becomes a kind of hard challenge, right? Because it becomes about life and the world and people. But that's what education is about, actually, at least to me.
But didn't great scientists like Bohr and Einstein and guys like that 70 years ago had the same discussion? What are we going to protect and what are we going to share with the world? Is this a new idea? Do we have to protect everything, or do we have to share everything? Is this an ongoing thing in the university system?
I think it's becoming more so because larger part of the university system is becoming dependent on funding and branding and high-profile centers and high-profile researchers. So we need to protect the brand, or the field of interaction design in children, for example. Who at Aarhus University owns that field? Who are allowed to do research in it? Because there's a lot of funding there. There's a lot of millions in kroner. It's the same in the school system. Who's allowed to think about technologies? Who are allowed to do technologies? Are you allowed to do technologies and think about technologies? Are you allowed to make your own designs, or should you buy those from the right people? But if we don't share, we get kind of enculturated into one way of knowing and doing. I don't know if that even was an answer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's not. To make a short answer, people don't believe it's possible. So one of my design missions is to show that it's possible through making me the designer of doing that in a certain way. So I'm not strategic. I just say yes to random things, for example. I don't write on one subject, which I'm the specialist on. I write on all kinds of crazy subjects, but with my voice, for example. And it's very confusing for some people that this is actually possible. Or I can make a research music video, as I talked about yesterday. How can you do that as a researcher? How is that research?
It makes me think about that TV show that's called Made in Denmark. Do you know what it is?
No.
It's like 6 different kinds of artists. One is like does ceramics, and one does woodwork, and one does jewelry or whatever. And then each week they visit each other and learn each other's crafts, and then they interpret that craft with their own artist's voice. It just made me think about that, the thing that they share the knowledge of this, like the skill. They teach each other the skill, and then they learn from each other's artistry.
Yeah.
And it's special because no one gets voted out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a competition.
And it's all special because they don't steal each other's craft, right? They transform it or integrate it into part of their own craft.
Yeah. And it's very, like you say, they don't steal. It's just very obvious who is an artist and who is just really good at their craft. Because from week to week you see that someone always wins the competition, and often it's the same person. So because he just knows how to interpret art instead of knowing his craft.
Or he's very good at gaming the system.
Yeah, well, maybe. I don't know. I don't understand what that means.
Well, knowing what counts to win.
Yeah, well, maybe, yeah. But it's a different judge every week.
Yeah.
So it's difficult, but maybe it's possible. It just made me think of that. Sorry, it was...
No, I think that's a very good point, actually. And I was just taking the opposite view because that's what I do.
Right.
That doesn't mean I disagree with you, actually.
No, I get it. I get it.
So I crashed 3/4 of the way through what you were saying, Rika, but I think there's 2 ways we can take what you were saying about open source.
Wes, you're really, I know you're a cathedral and everything in the picture, but you're kind of, your voice is very, it's cracking up, or what you say in English.
Oh, so it's still broken, huh?
Yeah, yeah, I think you have to jump out and in, perhaps, because the Hangouts sometimes do that to you.
Yeah, I don't see the cathedral, I see my picture. Okay, I'll go back out and in.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I'll just touch upon a subject in the chat. I think the last 2 points in the chat are very interesting as well. The one saying, I don't think there will be a problem sharing in this group. We'll probably just find our own way to do it when the needs come. And then somebody say, maybe we should do it before the needs occur, because we may not realize hidden treasures. And I'm really agreeing with the last point, given that that was what we found last year, that they really found the cross groups annoying because they took a lot of effort, like the history thing we talked about earlier. It took a lot of effort, they took a lot of time, and you didn't feel they didn't feel they had the time for that. They didn't feel it was worth it, and it was only kind of 2/3 of the semester in that it suddenly made sense to them. So it could be starting with trying to meet across the groups without me being there to make sure it happens, and just talk about whatever you need to talk about, because that might not be what the hot seat is about, or what I'm doing, or it could be reading each other's milestones, or it could be whatever, and it could also just be talking about how hard it is to be on this education, as they did a lot of the time.
I think we already started that process, like, because we already have a Facebook group without you.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And that's actually also nice for me, because they didn't have that last year, and it was also a sign of trust, but it could also be kind of hard for me as an educator to be in, because often when you're a normal educator, you see the group, the people 3 hours a week, and then you are not hanging out in their study groups or in their whatever they say when I leave the room and stuff like that. So I can be blissfully ignorant if I'm a bad teacher or not. We shouldn't, but there's also like the human factor in it, and that was really interesting for me as a meta reflection last year, that where is the balance in that. So it's nice that you took an effort to create that balance.
Not me personally, but yeah.
Yeah, you as a group, the beast.
Right. As long as it's not the beasts of burden.
Yeah, well, it will be as well. I think it will be all kinds of beasts, Ines.
Yeah. Right.
But I think right now, I mean, we actually did.
But I think the whole sharing thing, and
we did initiate.
Actually, most of what we've talked about today is a question about culture and creating a culture for doing all of these things. Whether it's a culture for using the technology in everyday work, or a culture for sharing knowledge, or sharing thoughts, or sharing ideas. It's just something that needs to be produced in a way, because it's like Jesper Tege says in that the 3 waves of the internet that we read last year. That wave number 2 is that there needs to be a culture for using the things. We can't just ignore it's there, and we can't just use it for everything. We need to know when to use it for what, and that's just not something that we have that has evolved yet.
No.
I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks that, or if everyone is offline.
I don't know if everyone is offline either. We should just enjoy the silence then.
Yeah. My picture of Wes is has his eyes closed.
Really? Oh, but I have the cathedral.
All right. He looks like he's falling asleep.
No, I'm wide awake. I don't know the piece that you were referring to, so that's why I didn't say anything.
Oh, so you are there, Wes. Excellent.
Oh yeah, I'm here. I see my picture.
Yeah.
I see it too.
Okay, so we might be in different dimensions, actually.
Right.
I think he's on the live stream, right?
No, because then he wouldn't be able to talk.
All right. But I can't hear him. Only you can hear him.
You can't hear me?
I can't hear him.
I can hear Wes as well.
Okay. That was just me.
Yeah, and I think you interrupted Mona before, perhaps because you couldn't hear her.
Yeah, I can't even see her.
Yeah.
Me. I'm
sorry, Mona.
Not Mona.
I must come up really arrogant now. Sorry.
So Mona, did you have anything you wanted to say before?
My name is Helena, but...
Oh, sorry, but this does say Mona here.
Oh, it does?
And I can see your face, so...
Okay, strange. Okay, well, no, it was just to the whole sharing part in our class, that we initiated that last year without a teacher ourselves, when that's what by comment kind of referred to, that we did it when we needed it, and I agree that we should do it before we need it this time, but I also believe that we are in the beginning of a new process right now, that we probably have to take in ourselves, and new groups have been created and so on. So we might have to land a little bit ourselves before we start sharing all sorts of stuff with the other groups, until the second that the need occur. Then I don't think it'll be a problem at all. I think we all agree that we would do that right away.
Yeah, and I think a point could be kind of in the middle of those two positions, that you might meet online to find out what your need is, because your need will probably not be the same as last year. So I can't give you the solution, because teaching the way I do and teaching in this kind of design thinking way, I have never taught the same course twice. I've never taught the same texts. I've never done the same lecture. I never anything, which is very hard work, but also the way I then do research. This is research, because this is me reading free texts for today that I have never read before, and then thinking about them with you. Or last week, half of the texts were just as new to me, so I needed also to read them and also prepare for them. So one middle ground could be to perhaps set up like a Facebook. What do they do in the ITD 14 group? They set up a Facebook poll and say, hey, who wants to meet and talk and hang out on this particular time? And then you can kind of click yes or no, and then just show up and hang out and drink some coffee for a couple of hours, and then stuff will slowly emerge and happen, I think. And that stuff that will emerge and happen will probably be very, very different from last year, which is not good or bad, but what you might, that sense making that will be going on across your groups.
Yeah, but I think that will happen naturally in our own Facebook group. But maybe I'm the only one who think that. I don't see it as a problem at all, and I will see it happen very soon.
Yeah, and then it probably will happen, because now you said it. So I agree, but I also think it requires effort, these sorts of things, because they are not valued by the system in this great way. You know, you need to find the time and the energy for that, or you need to be very naive, like I am. I just do it, and then I don't sleep. You know.
We noticed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm always there.
Yeah.
Caring for you, and ready to answer and stuff like that. But that's just how I do education. That doesn't mean that I think you should do education that way. But what you will find, I think, is that this process that you're in the beginning of is gonna be very different from the first semester. It will be very stressful. It will be very hardcore, and it will require a lot of reading and a lot of thinking and a lot of yelling, probably also. So if you don't I don't think you will feel the need for it, because you will be totally stressed out. So you need to make the decision that it's important or something like that, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Well, I have. We will forgive you if you bring cake at Kudim next time. Yeah, do that. Or you could, yeah. Or you could bring a virtual cookie. I think actually we could put hat on each other's faces and stuff like that. Somebody usually put hats on me when I'm talking.
Yeah, I think so. I can't really see anything. I just see all black dots. Everyone's just a picture.
Yeah, I have a picture. Maybe I'm just black. It's because I'm so scared of turning on the camera, so this thing will crash again. So for just this hot seat, I will be motionless.
I think Rikke, you told before you never do the course the same way, and I don't neither think that the students will do things the same way. I think maybe you will see something quite new with this group. That's why we haven't done it like the ITDD 14.
Sorry, was it Helene?
I did.
Yeah, you're really, really breaking up. I don't know if any of you heard it more clearly.
It was fine. I heard it fine.
Oh, it's the same here.
Yeah. What I did hear, and then you can say yes or no in the chat, was something about how the students were, how you are different from the students last year or something like that.
Yeah, we are different from the students last year, and you told us you do the teacher different every year, and I think that's natural for me, because as a teacher and as a student, I always do things in a new way. We are always in a new way, in going to a new place. And that's why we can't do the same like they did last year. But maybe someday something new happens here. We're just waiting.
Yeah.
And
okay.
reading.
So I can almost kind of put together some of the stuff you were saying. So what we're talking about is, well, my teaching is not the same. You are not the same, but that's very normal. Yeah. That's not necessarily normal at the university, I would say, first of all, because there's also a lot of stress. This system is potentially more crazy than the primary school and secondary school, because we shouldn't even be teaching, or we are not valued for teaching. So what we should do, if we are doing what the system wants us to do, is maximize our research time and minimize our teaching time. And you can't do that if you do everything differently every year. So like and it's not even true for the primary school, I think, because my ex-husband's parents were both primary school teachers, and they didn't learn a lot of new stuff every time they had a class, because the kind of system is set up so you use a very long time on preparing your lectures in the beginning of your career, whatever that career is. And then later on you prepare less and less, and you read less and less, because you know you are comfortable within that subject, and you know Schön or something like that, so you can always talk about Schön, and there might be something new happening after Schön, but I don't really care, because I do Schön, and Schön works for me, and Schön works for that argument I have, and it's also easier for me because I don't need to read the damn book every time, and I don't even need to make new slides. That doesn't mean I do exactly the same thing, but I still have the same slides and the same texts. So I think that's not necessarily entirely true, at least not perhaps in the radical way I tend to do it, by totally redesigning the whole course, redesigning all of the projects, the process, the group ordering, the hot seat tutorial, which you knew, who in their right mind would do stuff like that to themselves while also trying to write papers and attend conferences and get funding and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the content is the same, but the way that it's delivered is different.
Yeah, and the content is also new.
Yes, also. Well, that's about some of the things that I see in the text that we read for today, about noticing and the wondering and the huge agony. It's all about having the same content, but looking at it in different ways, different optics, and treating it differently.
Yeah, and I think that's what I use you for, in a certain way, is making me noticing and wondering about my ways of teaching or educating, and also my way of writing about education, because that's my way of stacking stuff, is that I also research education. So you make me notice and wonder because I change stuff, like you are my design process, and not in a guinea pig way, but I'm really trying to be better this year than I was last year. And the only way I can be better as an educator this year is if I change stuff based on my noticing and wondering last year for an entire semester. And that I also change stuff along the way, which is also not normal, I think, in the primary school system, in the secondary school system, or at the university, at least of all. You usually get like a semester plan, and you have all the texts, and you have all the subjects, and then I go and teach the subjects, and then you go to exam. And I don't even really know what we are going to do in 14 days, because I'm noticing and wondering here, and on what you're saying on Facebook and stuff like that, and then I do stuff, you know. So it's like an iterative design process every time we meet, for me as well.
Yeah.
So yes, we do the same thing. We think about also as learners, we notice and we wonder about the things that we are subject to, the things that we experience in the classes or in this hot seat tutorial. So it kind of works both ways like that.
Exactly, we share.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rika, what you said about traditional university teaching, that's, if we were traditional university lecturers, we would know nothing about our student learning at all. It wouldn't even be on the table.
Yeah.
Which I think is really funny, because the university says, well, we can know about our student learning from measuring the outcomes after we give the lecture from the same text that we've used for the last 15 years. But that really has nothing to do with the actual students that you have in your class, and what they're thinking about and what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
It's funny when we tell people, or when I tell family and friends, on how I learn and teach in this environment. They actually ask me, "Are you sure it's an university degree?" and I find myself like I have to explain myself all the time.
Yeah, well, I also have to explain that I'm actually a researcher, you know, because I do strange things, and that I'm actually teaching, you know.
Yeah.
And are you sure you're teaching because it sounds like you have too much fun?
Exactly. Yeah.
And also, you sound like you have too much fun. Are you sure you're like learning stuff?
yeah, I am.
What are you really doing, you know? Yeah, but I think that's also what we are trying to figure out, right? We are trying to figure out how to do education with technologies, or through designing, or with media, or through technologies, you know, depending on, or by redesigning organizations, as you are doing next semester, going up a level. So that's why we're doing this, and also I'm doing this to kind of show, you know, the rest of the university as a teacher that it might be possible to teach in other ways without becoming less academic, as is the thing I then get, you know. Yeah, you can teach that way, but you know, my class is kind of academic and theoretical, and you're doing design, and I'm like, well, I also do the same in my computer game theory class, which is purely text reading. We also play with robots. We perform theory with robots, for example, like you did in that. We also do that in the philosophical classes. So it's a way of thinking again about the experiences that you want to allow for, and the values and the virtues that you kind of design your teaching for, or design your educational design, as this course is my educational design. So what, you know, I can't control it, but I can invite for stuff to happen. I surely can't control you anyway. Even though we often, as when we are only talking, in an auditorium for 3 hours, we can almost kind of tell ourselves that, right? Because I told you what you need to know, so now you know.
Yeah, but I think this discussion led much further. It led to a lot of other stuff also that we actually didn't plan on talking about. We talked a lot about that in our group on the backstage. But we've been talking about a lot about school and about teaching, but not specifically teaching and this. But it's also something that comes from these texts that we read, and then it just goes out of one tangent or a strain. We follow another road, so to speak. So how the whole thing develops into something else than you thought it.
So I think actually, I don't know, can everybody hear me kind of clearly yet still?
Yep.
Okay, because everyone is cracking up in my end. I don't know if you can understand each other anymore, actually.
I'm hearing everybody pretty fine.
Okay, so we might need a kind of, I don't know, translator or something, because I can't really hear you, Wes, and not Mona, but Mona on my screen, and also Matthias is cracking up, and Frederik is cracking up, and Heidi, I don't know if you're still there.
I'm still here.
And also cracking up, and Magnus.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah. So if you and Wes can hear each other clearly, you can kind of carry on, but I kind of can't understand you clearly enough, so I just start to kind of talk. So, but perhaps we are also kind of nearing the end of this hot seat. I think.
It feels to me like we've sort of covered things that we were talking about.
Yeah, there's a question for you, Wes, on the chat I can see. So how does Wes see facilitators? We had to talk about facilitators and schoolmasters and guides.
I'm not sure I understand that question. What do we mean by facilitators?
Yeah, I think what I talked about was that we were more than educators, could be more than facilitators. That we are perhaps also have the responsibility to be guides and not just facilitate stuff. I think that was my reading of that role that they're asking for.
Yeah.
Perhaps a second opinion on.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree with what you were saying. I think that sort of goes back to what we were saying before about, if you're going to teach from the side rather than lecture to the class, it's a much more complicated task. Enrique, you're really saying, the way that you teach is very labor intensive, and I think that that's right. That if you're going to sort of let it be a really active, dynamic learning situation, then you really have to sort of do more than facilitate. You have to really sort of role model the way in which you work. You have to share your ideas. You have to sort of be able to think through new material with people. I think thinking through, it's sort of a lot of this sort of role models a way of working.
Cracking up pretty much on my end.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You're a little quiet on my end too. I've noticed.
Yeah, sorry, Wes. I was just saying that I think I will leave it to you to kind of wrap it up.
Okay.
because I think people in the chat, at least to my knowledge, can kind of hear you clearly. So there might be something you want to say based on the discussion you have kind of heard today and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. There's a couple of sort of further comments from this that I'm seeing. I think whoever wrote the idea of reflective facilitators, that's a sort of nice way to think about it. And I think that that's true that somebody said to me in another talk that I did, because I was talking about mentoring, they were asking sort of whether mentoring was more sort of hierarchical than sort of peer feedback. And I think that's right. It's sort of like Sean's notion of guides, that you often have a kind of agenda or understanding about where you're going to go. I think that's sort of something that if you have something to teach, then that's what I meant by role modeling. What Rika does is sort of role models a way of working. She clearly has an agenda and is moving toward that agenda, but it's a very open agenda that allows other people to have a say in, right? Do you guys agree? You're her students. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I just had the microphone off.
Yeah, you were muted.
Yeah. I was nodding.
Right. So how do we summarize all the things that we've talked about? How do we wrap all of this? Is a lot of stuff. How do we wrap all this up?
Well, what was our thesis for the conversation? We can have a conclusion.
What was our thesis? My thesis crashed, so I don't have it up anymore. I mean, one of the things that we were trying to do was integrate what I've been studying and saying about noticing and wondering as a way of noticing and wondering is a sort of framework for guidance, right? It's a framework for being student-centered. It's a framework for saying, I'm looking carefully at your work, and I'm wondering things about what you were thinking or what you were doing or where you could go next. And so it remains very reflective, connected to the student, not sort of teacher-oriented. We talked about how hootology is linked to that, right? The sort of notion of a very self-directed learning that, again, involves this sort of reflective process. And that took us down a bunch of avenues. It took us down the avenue of how do you have the time to do this? How do you have the bravery to do it? Because it means you have to admit you don't know things, that things are wrong. What can the technology tools do for us? How can we design for this kind of practice, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of that? And then in this last bit, Rika was talking about her own sort of radical. I'm open to sort of just sharing my ideas to the world and being open source about it, and sort of involving and being very creative about every time I teach, I do it differently, because this is just a process of learning for me too, right? I'm sort of taking everybody with me on my adventure. Are there things that other people want to add to that? Were there other things that you took away from the conversation?
I almost dare not say anything because I'm afraid I'm interrupting someone.
Not at the moment.
All right. Well, maybe just the sharing part. The sharing is caring. That we talked a lot about that too.
Yeah.
And that we should take that to our professions too.
Yeah.
And maybe try to create a culture where that is the norm.
Yes. Right. And Heidi, you emphasized that, and that was something I sort of missed as I was summarizing. I think you're absolutely right that in this process we're also working on changing cultures. right? So we're thinking about ways we can encourage a culture of sharing and openness, and how to deal with that, and how to, again, be the person who takes the first step into that.
Yeah, and how to create a society where that is legal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and how do you fight against your own cultural norms that says a good person, I don't know what it would be, like, a good person doesn't blow their own horn, and that it would be snobby to say these things or share these things, or
Right.
Anybody else have anything you want to add in the last couple of minutes? Some of you still can't hear me, right?
I can hear you.
I was going to make a meta comment earlier. I've noticed with Google Hangout that once you get over 4 people, it's like Google, they say you can do up to 10 or 11 or something like that in a Hangout, but I've noticed over 4 or 5 it starts to get kludgy.
Maybe that's right.
Yeah, so that's another technology problem we have to work on.
Yeah.
What about the other platform, Appear In? How many people can you be there?
I don't know.
But it can't be recorded, right?
Yeah, that could be right. We've used Zoom, although I don't think we've tried to record Zoom, so I don't know if you can record in Zoom. We've had better luck with the stability of Zoom, but Zoom is funny. I don't know if you guys use Zoom over here, but Zoom is one of those things where you can talk for, I think, an hour for free, but then after that you have to pay money.
Yeah.
Or start a new Zoom, which means you have to interrupt the meeting and just start a new one.
Right. Oh, Nikolai, you could just put up your camera and record the screen.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of people I can't hear. I'm not sure. All right, well, so I think we should sign it off then, if everybody feels like they've either said or not able to say what they wanted to say in the last seconds here.
Can I ask Rikke a practical question before we leave?
Yeah, if I can understand you.
I'll do this in Danish. Sorry, Wes.
Okay, that's fine.
Det var lige med hensyn til vejledningstider i morgen, og fordelingen af disse.
Ja. Er det vejledning, eller er det feedback i morgen? Jeg mener, det er feedback, er det ikke?
Jo, det er feedback. Undskyld, det er mig.
Det er sådan noget at skrive noget.
Okay, så det er så når du siger 9 til 3, så er det bare tilfældigvis, hvad du lige altså i den rækkefølge du lige når til, og så skal man lige.
Ja, og det bliver nok faktisk ikke 9 til 3, fordi jeg skal mødes med den meget fine Carol Brandt i morgen, og det er det eneste tidspunkt hun kan, inden hun tager til USA igen. Så det bliver nok sådan noget se aften noget i stedet for.
Okay.
Og jeg tror det jeg vil gøre, det er ikke at skrive det i jeres blogindlæg, men at skrive det i et Google Doc.
Okay.
Og det kan også være, at jeg vil gøre det mundtligt. Jeg har ikke helt besluttet endnu for, hvad der virker bedst. Det er sådan, hvad der lige passer bedst. Det ved jeg, når jeg har kigget på dem.
Okay.
Så ved jeg, om det giver mest mening at mødes med jer i et hot seat og snakke om det, eller skrive nogle ting, eller hvad der lige giver mening. Men jeg kigger på dem i morgen. Under alle omstændigheder.
Okay, så det er mere din egen arbejdstid, du har noteret mere, end det er også vores tid?
Jeg har sat det af i kalenderen, det er så blevet ødelagt. Egentlig havde jeg en idé om, at jeg ville være der fra 9 til 3, og så kunne I ligesom følge med i mine kommentarer. Og det kan også godt være, at det bliver noget hot seat tutorial, altså hvor jeg snakker mere, men så kan det bare ikke blive i morgen alligevel, fordi Carol, som sagt, det var den eneste tid, der lige var mulig at mødes med hende, inden hun tager til USA igen. og så skal jeg lige have fundet et andet tid, og det kan godt være, at det bliver fredag, men jeg mærker lige efter. Jeg tror, det giver mest mening at snakke med jer om det faktisk. Jeg tror, I får mest ud af det.
Okay.
Så det er lige med at få tweaked, eller virkelig lavet vold på min kalender, og så finde den tid der, fordi jeg tror, det er vigtigt.
Og så bare i så god tid som muligt ud til os, ikke?
Jamen altså, jeg kan godt sige allerede nu, hvornår at den eneste tid fra morgen til aften er. Det er fredag mellem 11.30 og 14. Det vil sige, der er en halv time til at være der, 20 minutter til at være gruppe.
Okay.
Fordi der er en, der heldigvis har aflyst en vejledning, specialevejledning, så der er blevet et åbent hul, som lige nu ikke er fyldt. Så jeg tror nu her, jeg tænker jo også bare sådan lige nu her, mens jeg snakker med jer. Så jeg tror, det vi gør, det er, at jeg laver en doodle nu her, lige bagefter, med nogle 20 minutter slots til hver gruppe, hvor vi snakker om milestonesene. Og så kan de jo optages, så alle kan høre det, selvom alle måske ikke lige kan være der fra hver gruppe. Så det bliver gruppevist. Men igen opfordrer jeg til så at dele vejledningerne med hinanden, fordi mange af de ting, jeg vil sige, gælder mere end en gruppe ofte. Så det er en god idé at have en YouTube-kanal, hvor I kan dele alle de her ting. Det ved jeg, de havde sidste år. Med alle vejledninger og alle hot seats og undervisninger og sådan noget.
Okay.
Så I kan se hinandens 20 minutters vejledninger og sige, hvordan er det egentlig i forhold til det, vi har gang i?
Yes.
Var det et okay svar?
Det var et rigtig godt svar. Tak.
Ja. Godt. Jamen, så tror jeg, det er det, vi gør. Og der er heller ikke nogen sådan fuldstændig gå amok kommentar på Today's Meet, så det tror jeg, vi gør. Og spændende med Carol, ja, jeg skal skrive et paper med hende til Oxford-konferencen om at bevæge uddannelse med teknologier ud over STEM og STEAM. Så det bliver fint. Hun arbejder med The Design Studio, hvilket også er meget relevant. Jeg tror, jeg vil dele et par tekster. Hun har skrevet nogle ret fine tekster. Dele et par tekster af hende mere. Godt. Jamen, var det det?
Yes.
Jeg tror.
Så lige sådan for at wrappe op her. Jeg har puttet en meget stor mængde ressourcer ind i den her tråd. Det var alt det, jeg noticed og wondered, mens jeg hørte jer snakke. Så der ligger alt muligt forskelligt. Man kan sige, det er sådan baggrundslitteraturen for i dag, hvis der er noget af det, vi har snakket om, som I gerne vil se, hvad jeg har sådan tænkt, det kunne være relevant det her. Der ligger en masse meget, meget forskellige ting derude lige nu. Tag og browse dem igennem, tag og samle dem sammen og smide dem op i et eller andet inspirationsbibliotek eller et eller andet, hvis det giver mening, eller gør med dem, hvad I vil. Det er den ene ting. Den anden ting er, at Today's Meet, de ting, der er blevet sagt herinde, forsvinder om en uge, så hvis I gerne vil gemme det, skal I ligesom have logget det på en eller anden måde. Det kan man gøre på flere forskellige måder. Det vil jeg lade være op til jer. To sidste ting. Jeg har snakket med Gwyneth i går. Hun er klar på sådan det bliver nok en 2 timers hot seat, den dag hun har jeg. Og hun sender nogle tekster om Ipsative Assessment og Connected Curriculum snart, som I får. Det er den næste hot seat, vi har om 14 dage. Så laver jeg en doodle til feedback på milestone fredag.
Yep.
Yes.
Det er super.
Godt. Jamen, tak for i dag.
Selv tak.
Thank you very much, Wes.
And thank you, Wes.
Thank you, Wes. Thanks everybody for a really good session.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.